Today we are joined by Jeff Arnold. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much, James. Happy to be here.
Yeah, and we're really happy to host you. So thank you for coming on the show today. Before we jump into some of the topics that I know we want to discuss, would you mind telling everybody a little bit about yourself and what you're currently up to?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that opportunity. So Jeff Arnold's the name, right? Been in the technology and financial services space for 30 plus years. I am an aged man, but and most recently have taken to giving back to the community and written 5 books. So fortunate that 4 of them are bestsellers on Amazon. And so the 30,000 foot takeaway is part author, part technology founder, and then part insurance geek, right? So those 3 wrapped in, plus probably father and husband. That's a simple description of my life. How's that?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. That's it's good to know where you're coming from and what you're working on. Thank you. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about today is really just strategies as it pertains to attracting and retaining talent. And I would love to kind of get your thoughts on what's going on from your perspective. Buzzy term, kind of great resignation, but what in terms of what you're seeing companies do, or what you think strategies should be for attracting and retaining talent. Like, what kind of trends are you seeing, and what are you essentially recommending in terms of how companies can get the best possible results?
Yeah, great. Thanks for that broad question. Yeah, we'll unpack that all day, right?
Yeah.
So I would submit this to your listeners, right? That no matter where you're at on your leadership or your management or your skill set, the last 3 years has challenged the way you've done everything as a leader, as a manager, how you codify, lead, move people to the next level. It's just it's called, of course, the Great Resignation or the Great Reset or whatever. But deep inside, it's really people looking to be valued, right? To be re-recruited, to be shown that they matter. And it just so happens that you have to, as a leader, I hate to use this word, but bifurcate, right? You have to almost bifurcate or stereotype, if you may, or if you will, by generation, right? And I say because you have to be thinking that there are really 4 generations at play in the workplace now. And I know your listeners don't need me to go through them all, but let's just just quickly run through to unpack this. And so you have baby boomers who, if their employer asked them to work 40 hours, they would give them 70 hours with no question asked and stay until the job's done. That's just how they are. Whatever it takes to get it done, that's how they did it, right? Then you had Gen X, right? The wasted generation, as they call them, because MTV was going to destroy their minds and Gilligan's reruns were going to, make them inept in the marketplace. Well, they hold most of the CEOs in mid-market and the glory and fame of middle management spaces right now, right? And so it's a little different than the baby boomer mindset, but still, if you ask them 40 hours, they'll give you 50 or 60 hours. You pivot to millennial or Gen Z, there's just a different expectation for each of them. And millennials are, show me how I matter, show me where I fit in. And a lot of times they want to do self-service or find the answers for themselves, as do Gen Zs online. And so, the Gen X cup would drink from the fount of knowledge from a baby boomer or the greatest generation or the silent generation before that. But the same, at least I submit to in my leadership experience in running companies with hundreds and thousands of employees, it pivoted at the millennial and the Gen Z, and they'll find the answers themselves. And so people in the Gen X and the baby boomer roles are finding they're not being asked for knowledge so much as just because that other generation will solve it for themselves. And so if you manage that, it's a lot of words to say this, if you manage that anywhere along the spectrum of an organization, without using the word stereotype, you have to place them into how they learn, how they want to be rewarded, how they want to be re-recruited. If you apply the same template to every generation, you're going to miss 3 of the 4 generations. And so it's a really long-winded answer, James, but that's my takeaway on the subject matter there.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. So I like how you broke it down on a generation level, and you're talking about how they want to be recognized and rewarded, and how those can be different. It's interesting. It's like we're on the 20th episode. I don't think we've actually talked about that angle before, so I'm really excited to dive a little bit deeper into that. I guess it's how, when you're working in an organization that has individuals that come from different generations, how do you balance those things when you think about how to reward individuals? Is it just as simple as saying like, look, managers need to be in tune and trained and have access to coaching and resources that allow them to provide a situational approach to how they lead members on their team? Or is there something like more so like a high level C-level strategy that has to be implemented in terms of this is what benefits should look like, or this is how we communicate our values and our culture? How do you really execute that strategy when you have a diverse group of employees that come from different generations?
Yeah, I think you've struck on a great subject matter, and it probably boils down to the leader, the executive, and their mindset, right? What you have to be in a manager in this day and age is you have to be very pliable, malleable, bendable, flexible, right? You have to be all those things because again, each subset is going to challenge you in a different way, right? The millennials get a lot of bad press, unfairly in my mind, right? But here's what you have to think, is there are so many millennials. So we go back to the baby boomers. Forever, that was the largest generation. And then it was the Gen X's, which is a much smaller generation. And the millennials, which is the largest generation, period, right? Of all the segments, that's the largest. And then the Gen Z behind that. And so millennials are loud and large and encompass such a large percentage of the workforce now that you have to not, you have to kind of bend to that, right? Because that's driving the future, and that is the future. The disconnect for executives, for leaders is, I don't want to call it a bad work ethic. The work ethic is so different. It's so much me first or vacation first or results first. I don't mean anything derogatory about this. It's just, again, baby boomer and Gen X, if you said you got to be at work at 8, they were there at 7, they didn't go home till it was done. And it's shifted. There's a definite pivot in the expectation of, I want to work anywhere, and I'm out at 39 and a half hours, and I'm not taking it home with me. Again, it's not bad. It's different. And so workplace culture is different. Workplace timelines to get stuff done is different. If you're scheduling large projects with deadlines, you have to think differently when you have 4 generations because they're all going to approach it differently. So again, we could spin forever, but the quick takeaway there is, if you're an executive or a leader or a recruiter in this space, you have to ask these very important questions about what is the role of this individual? What is this individual's belief set? How do you re-recruit this individual? Because you're going to re-recruit somebody like me different than you're going to re-recruit a Gen Z, right? A person who's 23 or 24. And so you just have to be cognizant, aware, focused on what moves the needle for them.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think it's one thing that I feel like a topic I keep coming back to is this concept of like, yes, at an organizational level, there are things that we can do to provide competitive benefits and providing employee surveys and doing things that are more like a scalable motion to creating great experiences for people and helping them achieve the best outcomes at work. But also to some extent, you can't scale relationships. Like you have to talk to people and have real conversations and understand how they're wired and how they like to receive, whether it be respect or be rewarded or whatever else, or their communication style. Not everything is a scale motion, right? That you can just kind of automate. Like sometimes it really does come down to situational leadership and get really knowing the people on your team and what they need in order to produce the best outcomes and have the best possible experience.
That's very valuable. I love that. I'm actually going to be stealing that from you because they're not scalable, right? You're absolutely right. You have to, as a leader or even a coworker, you have to figure out which levers you need to pull to get the results from this teammate or this employee or even your manager. You have to manage them sometimes, right? You got to figure out which lever to pull. And so it's not manipulation. It's like, look, we got to get a job done. Your manager could be the roadblock. Your employees could be the roadblock. What thing can you manipulate to move it forward, right? And it could be words of affirmation. It could be a challenge. It could be just giving them the ball and letting them run with it. You have to figure out where they're at, right? And what I find, because I'm at a space in my career, you spend your first 10 to 12 years learning in your career space, and then 20 to 28 years earning, right? And then you spend the last part of your career, if you're fortunate, giving back, right? And so my sole function now to our mid-level and senior level executives is to give back, right? To transfer some of that knowledge with the full understanding that the companies that they run in the future are vastly different than the companies that I ran. I mean, because technology has affected everything, changed everything, enhanced, improved everything. And so as I'm coming up, it was more about, tasks and deadlines and managing resources. Now there's an app for that, or software as a service for a lot of that. And so just being aware of that. So the point I was trying to make there is at this point in my life, it's giving back, but also understanding what each person needs to feel valued and to challenge them, right? You also can't challenge them different. You can't be direct with everyone. You destroy them. And the main thing, if anybody takes anything away from any of your conversations, it's this: you must find a way to correct behavior without destroying the person, right? The moment you destroy the person in your insult, your recommendation, or whatever, they have checked out from you and they're looking for somewhere else, or they aren't as engaged. So you have to always be aware and ask yourself, how can I correct behavior without destroying this person? So just a valid key takeaway for anyone.
Yeah, that's a really good one. That's definitely very valuable. And I wanted to ask you more about other mistakes that you're seeing companies make. Like I always kind of like, it's always good to talk about upside and how to optimize, but I always like to start with mistakes. Like, what are the holes that companies can fall into? So if we could kind of continue, if we could go down that path a little bit, what are some of the biggest, I guess, mistakes you're seeing out there in the market when it comes to people's approach to talent and people? Are there any other kind of holes that talent leaders out there and CEOs out there listening in or can kind of hear from you in terms of what they need to do to get good outcomes or really avoid catastrophe and have a competitive offering?
Luckily for us, we don't have to look far, right? Because if there's a way to do it wrong, yours truly has done it wrong, right? So, and those are the most expensive lessons and the most valuable lessons. So this is an easy one, right? So if you just back up 2 or 3 years before COVID hit, right? We're a very results-driven organization. There's deadlines, there's timelines, there's goals, there's tasks, there's objectives, right? And as a leader, you manage to objectives, either by quarter or profitability or whatever metric you're being measured upon. What gets measured gets done, and that's what drives you. In comes COVID. All of a sudden, it takes longer to get stuff done. There's a mental health awareness that you have to be made aware of, right? And you can't charge as hard or charge as fast as you used to. And so we talk about failures right here. I enter COVID, everyone's working remote. We got them all over the world. We have them Vietnam, Malaysia, Mexico, 6 or 8 different states, Canada, they're all over. And I'm expecting the same results. I still have 1 foot on the gas, man, right? I mean, it's in drive and we're moving, right? We got shareholder results, we got quarterly results, everything that any executive faces, plus profitability. But really quickly, the wheels start coming off when you're trying to charge really hard or drive results really hard. And COVID, or all this mass telecommuting, forced me, and I'm sure it forced other leaders, to be more empathetic, right? To slow down, check in. Hey, how are you mentally? Now, that's not, admittedly, that is not a skill set or a managerial thing in your quiver of management skills that is readily available for everyone, because managers don't get brought on for their empathy, right? They, excuse my French, they just get shit done. I'm sorry, right? That's why you're a manager, right? And so we're not often known, but you had to develop that skill set if you want to remain relevant and viable and part of a team. And so what I see failures was internally, right? I had to take 1 foot off the gas or take it off the gas a little, pump the brakes and just check in with people. And now we're seeing kind of something similar where half the people are back, but some people, don't want to return for whatever reason. There's a lot of anxiety about returning. And then others will raise the flag, well, I'm way more productive at home. But the problem with that, and I challenge everyone, culture cannot be built remotely. I have tried endlessly. We've gone through all kinds of team building, online stuff. Culture happens eyeball to eyeball, belly button to belly button, face to face. And so every company is surrendering their culture to validate and to uphold this telecommuting thing. Again, I didn't say telecommuting was bad, but every company culture is suffering because of that. And that's what differentiates and validates companies is their culture. So I would just say this, that one of the failures that we're going to see moving forward from companies during this is just a lack of developed culture. It's just too tough to do remotely. So
it is, and getting back to empathy, right? I think that's another challenge. It's when people are detached from each other and they're jumping on the occasional Zoom call, but they're not actually meeting in person. I think some empathy, we risk empathy being lost along the way. And so it's just very important, particularly for people in leadership, I think, to really slow down and ensure, like, okay, am I communicating in such a way that communicates empathy along with whatever expectations or coaching or standards or whatever you want to, whatever it could be. Am I also communicating on the human level and making sure that I'm meeting that human need, and I'm being empathetic and I'm being understanding? Because it's different, when you build a relationship with somebody in person, right? And you're building more of that rapport, and you're having more of just kind of laid back conversations, and you get to really know somebody on a personal level. I think that there's something about that creates more empathy, right? I mean, do you see it from that perspective as well? Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100% agree with you, right? And so how do you balance that? You want to be an empathetic organization because you need to, because at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about the generations, right? And the last two generations, the empathy is a requirement now, right? It is no longer just a great thing. It's a requirement now that you're empathetic and sympathetic to our needs. But as a company, you still have to get stuff done. So, I challenge our mid-level managers this way all the time, not to their great dissatisfaction, I might add, but I say, listen, two things are truthful about all your employees working from home and even the office. Everyone, and I mean everyone these days, are driven to distraction, right? There are so many social media apps, so many websites, so many shiny, blinky things that everyone is driven to distraction. As a leader, you have to be aware where you're driven and buckle down and get through that for at least an hour, hour and a half a day. If you're not moving it forward, your organization's not moving forward, and your team isn't moving forward. Because if you're driven to distraction, that you're part of the problem. So having people understand that you too are driven to distraction, just be aware of it. You can't escape it. There's a new app, there's a new shiny software, there's new something everywhere. There's a new stock that you want to follow, right? There's a new income stream, but you're driven to distraction. Just be aware of that. And then the other thing I tell them, which of course is met with some resistance, is I just submit to your staff and to your team that you're not overworked, you're overwhelmed. There's so much distraction, so much going on that you're confusing overworked with overwhelmed, because now, we have people going, I need more help, I need more help. Our volume hasn't grown, the workload hasn't grown. You're overwhelmed from so many other things in your life. So we got to stop being driven to distraction and stop being overwhelmed. So those are just two, again, those aren't always received graciously when I'm giving truth bombs out like that, but I think they resonate with most people. And if you're real with yourself, you'll drink that in and say, yeah, that's a vitamin I should take.
That's really good advice. I think just right now I'm seeing that just as a leader, there's just so much craziness and things going on in the world. And I think it is quite overwhelming for a lot of people. Right. So, you're right. It's like, you don't want to just completely, put the blinders on and not be aware of what's going on in the world around you, but it's finding the right balance to where you can still be effective and show up as your best self with your family, your kids, your and professionally. Right. It's a balancing act. And I think, maybe some of that just comes with having more life experience, and growing up and having gone through it for a while. I think maybe that's something that, maybe people hopefully grow and can kind of find that balance better as they kind of progress toward, later in their career and whatnot. But yeah, that's a really good point. And I had actually not thought about it from that perspective, the overworked versus overwhelmed. I feel like that's a really interesting insight. I appreciate you sharing that with me today.
Again, it's not always received graciously, and tough news is never easy to deliver. But I think if there's a lot of fact and a lot of truth behind it, right? And if you get past the anger, it resonates. And several of our staff have said to me, hey, driving on a long trip. I got to digest what you were saying. At first, it really stung. I felt like I was swallowing a fish hook. But then later, hey, old man, you weren't wrong. I just wasn't ready to hear that yet. And so, right, it's kind of rewarding. So as long as people are aware of it, you can move through it, right? And you
Right.
know, the demands on your life are so extreme. If you're a husband, if you're a father, if you're a wife, your spouse, whatever, those demands are there on top of everything else, on top of providing, up on top of putting a roof over your head. There are so many demands that you could be distracted by everything. You owe it to yourself, to your future self, and to your leader self to have some quiet time alone. If it's not with the journal, with the to-do list, let's just focus on that. No social media, no email. Nobody moved the world forward with email and social media, right? They had to
Right.
do some quiet introspective work, right? So get
Yeah.
still, be quiet, focus on you and future you. That's some takeaways.
That's good. That's good advice. So maybe we can pivot a little bit because I feel like you have a really kind of intuitive perspective, and you're very good at, I think, simplifying these types of concepts that are deal with, life philosophy towards success, and as well as just psychology. Like you seem to, from my, from this interaction, obviously the first time we've had a chance to really deep dive and do this, but you seem to be very good at this. So I would love to kind of just go down this path a little bit. So let's just take a step back from talent acquisition. Like what are some of the other key things that you share with your team in terms of just like general success psychology? And I don't mean like success only through the lens of like money and titles, right? I mean, that's obviously part of it. And that's, first it's like, that's important to a lot of people, and that's okay. That's good. I mean, it's important to me too. I just, it's obviously more holistically. I'm curious whether it has to do with like financial success, career success, or just overall, just living life to the fullest. Do you have any other kind of, advice that you share with your team that's similar to what you just shared with me? Any other kind of pointers or tips?
Yeah, some. So you have to be, I've been doing this 31 years, so I'm aware now, and I didn't know this even 15 years ago. You, again, I'm in the stage where I want to give back, but that doesn't mean that everyone on our team is really to sit at my feet, listen, and drink in what I have to spew out, right? There has to be a willingness and a readiness on the part of that person, and you need to realize that, because otherwise you're wasting your words, and you're wasting your time, and you're wasting your energy. And so on two notes here, if you're a leader or an executive trying to give back, be aware that you're just sowing seed in an infertile ground that's not going to grow, and stop planting that seed, right? Focus it where it's going to grow. Conversely, if you're somebody who's sitting at the feet of a leader or hoping to stand on their shoulders and move ahead in the future, let them know that you appreciate. You don't have to agree with everything they say. No one agrees with anything 100% of anybody says, but drink in that knowledge. And so on both fronts, as a leader, make sure you're not just wasting, your time and energy and planting seeds that aren't going to grow if they don't want to hear. And I could, every leader knows that I could say a dozen things to some of our people, and they will push back. Well, Google says it this way. I'm like, well, Google only says based upon the limited input you gave. I'm giving you 30 years worth of, leadership experience of how this ship could go off course. And so they have to come to the understanding of that. On the other side, if you are studying under someone or in a mid or entry level management position, even if you don't agree with that person who's above you, there's knowledge they have that you could glean from that. So one of the greatest things I've ever been able to do is stand on the shoulders of two exceptional men that 3 tried to teach me in my life. 2, I was smart enough to shut up and learn from them. And I got to be elevated and catapulted into the executive level suite because I stood on their shoulders, right? It wasn't all of Jeff Arnold's work. It was like, oh, somebody dumped a lot of information and knowledge and skill sets into me, and I was ready and I listened. So just be aware of that. If you're just starting out, there's a mentor out there for you. May not be your first, and when you're ready and your heart's ready, that teacher will come. So that's a little philosophical, but that's
Yeah, no, I think it's really important. I mean, for me, I really buy into the importance of psychology and just your general life philosophy. I mean, quite honestly, I think probably Tony Robbins has had a bigger impact on me more than any other human being on this planet. I mean, I really early in my career dived into everything about psychology, success, getting the most out of life. It doesn't mean that I was always able to execute it to the fullest. I mean, I've obviously made a ton of mistakes just like everybody else, but I think net I'm probably up as a result of investing in that, understanding psychology and understanding, like, as you said, it's like, and there's so much to it, right? Like one of the lessons you just shared is, yeah, like even if somebody has a different leadership style that maybe is optimized for how you prefer to learn, or, maybe you're not 100% of your values are completely aligned or your interests are completely aligned, just making sure that you're always open to be humble enough to listen and to really, take the time to learn as much as you can. Right. It's just incredibly important to just always kind of like remain the student. Right.
Yeah.
And kind of keep an open mind to learning as much as you can from every experience. And, just to kind of, to follow up on that, I also, one thing that I've learned throughout the years is that many times it's like the hardest, like the obstacles that you go through, right? That when things aren't going your way, are generally the best lessons that we have in life. I mean, that's where you learn the stuff that are going to propel you to success in the future. And so I think it's important for people to really understand that you really need hardship. It's like when you go to the gym, right? And you lift weights, and if you're not getting any resistance, you're not building any muscle. And it's kind of similar with hardship. You have to go through those types of things in order to build the resilience and the life philosophy and everything that's required to be successful. So, it's of course it's scary when, there's, okay, the market could be turning, or wow, this war is going on. I mean, all those things are terrifying. I'm not saying they're not. I'm just saying, when these types of things happen, it's less about what happens and more about the meaning you attach to it, because the meaning you attach to it's ultimately going to influence the actions you take, and the actions you take are going to influence the trajectory of your life. And I think, if people can, try to, I'm not saying be ungroundedly optimistic. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we have to choose a belief system and a life philosophy that's going to enable us to get the best possible results. We might as well choose one that works, right? I mean, we can decide to believe whatever we want, right? So
very valuable feedback, man. Very, very, very true. Two things resonated when you were saying that. It's like the resistance and stuff. This is a universal truth too, right? There are no easy leadership moments, right? Because the easy leadership moments don't develop you as a leader, right? If they're easy, there's no refining. You only get refined in the fire and trudging up the hill and falling back down here. That's when you get your skill set tested. And conversely, there are no emotionally neutral leadership decisions, right? There are none. The moment as a leader you make a decision, there's three different categories. Some are going to approach it and be, oh great. Some are going to cross their hands, stand on the sidelines, cross their arms, and prove that you're wrong, and the other is just going to never join whatsoever. And so there are no emotionally neutral leadership decisions. So don't think that you're going to make a decision, everyone's just going to get in behind you. You're going to fight those battles on everything you change. That's just what's going to happen. So
yeah, and it's hopefully you can develop the type of culture where it's like people may not agree with everything that you do, but they still understand that you're operating and overall in everybody's best interest, and they hopefully they trust that you're trying to balance the objectives of the business with the objectives of the employees, and they it's in the company's best interest to have that alignment. But there are some times where it's like there's like certain decisions where it's like, okay, you have to toggle between this is how it's going to impact people individually, this is how it's going to impact the organization at scale, and sometimes there isn't the perfect answer that fits both of those things. And then it really comes down to a leader's ability to communicate that and say, look, like these are kind of the options in front of us. We could go this path or this path. Ultimately, if we don't go the path of the business, then that potentially could impact our trajectory and the benefits and professional development and everything that we can offer. So, I 100% understand. I hear you. I get it. I really do. I'm listening. And also this is still kind of what we have to this is the decision we have to make in order to get to the next level. So we can, at that point, hopefully be able to prioritize what you're looking for. So sometimes you're right. It's never like a situation in which you can make a decision that's not going to, make people necessarily agree with everybody, but then it just comes down to, can you communicate it in such a way where people still feel heard and respected and valued and all these types of things. Right.
Yep. Yeah, we can agree to disagree. Like, I have with other people above me and below me and whatever in my career. Look, we agree to disagree. I hear you. I'm not invalidating your concerns, but the decision is made based upon my title, and this is the decision I'm going, right? There's a seat for you on this bus, and I want you on this bus, but I'm driving the bus, right? This is how it is sometimes. And so those are conversations that get easier the more you've been doing it, right? Some leaders want to shy away from them, and admittedly, they aren't easy, but the more you have practice at it, the better you get at it.
That's the thing. You can't shy away from them because then you're never going to get better at them. You have to, I mean, I think that was probably the area I was most unequipped with when I initially had started my company. So when I started my company, I had a sales background. So I started Secure Vision. I sold a bunch of stuff. We quickly went to around, 650,000 in revenue. And then I had to go out and hire people, and I had never managed before. Right. And so that was a huge learning curve. And I quickly realized I was failing at it. I don't know what I expected, but it's a skill set that takes time to develop. You really have to learn how to communicate high expectations, high empathy at the same time. You need to know, you have to be situational. There's so much nuance to being good at it. Right. So fortunately I hired an executive coach that really started to help me. And it was so bad at first. I felt like I had to talk to him before I have any.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But I look back, it's funny. It's like I look at employees like the first year I was in business, and I was like, oh, I feel bad. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, you had to work with me my first year as a manager.
That's
It's
right.
like the people now, they have it good, hopefully, right? I think
Yeah,
we
yeah.
do. I figured it out. But yeah, it took me personally. Like, I'll just be honest and just say it. Like, it took me a few years to get good at those conversations. Fortunately, though, I guess for better or for worse, I had them. I would always have them. I did the trial and error. I probably at first, I didn't always provide the best experience for the people on the team because I was learning. It was trial and error. But you learn and you get better throughout your career. And fortunately, as long as you're committed to improving and having those conversations, it does get a lot easier. And now at this point, it's really just, I know I feel very good about being able to communicate our decisions in a way that people will understand. And even if it's not like their ideal answer, it's like everybody feels like understood, and they understand why the decision's being made, and they understand that it's ultimately in our best interest, right? Because it's going to create the most opportunity for the company, which is going to impact everybody, right?
Yeah, that's what experience gives us, right? Like what you just went through your first 2 or 3 years, right? It's learn by trial and error, but now it's experience. So you stand on those blocks and you've got that experience. Someone else can learn from you. So yeah, agreed. Also, we are aligned there because I really saw great professional development when I went to a coach. This is in the 90s, man, when you did it on the phone for an hour every Thursday or whatever. And I spent 2.5 years at the feet of Michael Gerber, the E-Myth, why most businesses don't work, when he was getting started. And I learned so much. He grew so big, I ended up working with other folks in his organization. Transformed how I think about business. Admittedly, I was, for some strange reason, really adverse or shied away from argumentative and confrontational conversations because I didn't see any value in them. But then all of a sudden, if you get labeled a weak-kneed, spineless kind of leader, then you have no authority. So sometimes you just have to slip in that suit, right? That Teflon suit that allows you to deliver the bad news, direct news,
Yep.
and firm about it, but you don't have to destroy the person, right? So yeah, we've all, no man is an island. Every man's had help from someone. And it sounds like we've gone a similar path, right?
Yeah.
Realizing we have deficiencies and shortcomings that we want to enhance because we want to be better leaders. So yeah.
For sure. And I would be as aggressive, and this is probably, I don't know if everybody would agree with this. I don't know if you'll agree with it, but I would go as far as to recommend that your first few years in leadership or your first years starting a business, you should be paying your advisors more than you're paying yourself.
Valid point.
Like that was one of the best decisions I ever made. When I started my company, I was paying on monthly retainers, multiple advisors. Because I was like, okay, they've been doing this for years. And that didn't mean that I always figured it out, or sometimes you get the advisor that's not the right fit and you go through that motion of figuring out how to get the right people. But I would say it's not just about for business owners. I think it's also for people that are just really, professionally ambitious. Like you should, if you get to the point where you're making 100K salary or more than that, if you can just commit to keeping your lifestyle where it's at,
Right.
and you can commit to investing a few $1,000s a month in yourself, it's ultimately investing in executive coaching and advisors is probably gonna have a greater return than investing in the stock market for you. Like if you literally just focus on putting that investment, just like you would think about compounding interest in the stock market over a period of 30 years, the same principle I feel like holds true to your own professional development, right?
Absolutely agree.
So,
Look, every great athlete has a team of psychological, psychiatric, food coaches, swing coaches, stock coaches, right, dribble coaches, and you can make the argument, yeah, but they can afford it. Well, you have to start somewhere. So get the ones you can. You just need someone to challenge you and not be a yes person, right? To push you when you want to stand still and to pull you when you want to sit down, right? So and give them that permission. So yeah, absolutely. And some of the best investments, and agree with you, that we made is continuing to invest in yourself. And that means external resources to help you along a lot of times.
right. Yeah. It's definitely, I mean, you have to have that. I think there's, so Peter Thiel was one of the co-founders over at PayPal, and he has this book called 0 to 1, which I highly recommend, by the way. Have you read it?
I have the book. I have not read every page, so I'm going to say no. I've read the cover and the front. So.
Right. Yeah. It's really good. It's I have it on audiobook. I've listened to it a couple times. And one of the concepts he talks about is like there's basically, he kind of breaks people into 4 categories. So obviously like oversimplification, but it's still helpful. Like, he talks about, I forget what the bottom 2 are, but like there's 2 different types of like pessimists essentially. The part that really interests me was like more of like there's 2 different types of optimists, right? And he basically said that there's one type of optimism that's helpful and there's another one that's useless. And he says like there's a certain optimist that's like an ungrounded optimist, like somebody who just expects the future to be better. Oh, it'll work out. Like, oh, I'm just, all I'm going to do is just, things will work itself out. The future is going to be better. Like he just says that that's obviously ridiculous. Like you're not going to create the things in your life that you want to by just thinking, okay, it's all going to work out. He said there's another type of optimism where it's like a grounded optimism where, if I work hard and I work smart and I pull in the right resources, the future is going to be better than today. And I always like really, that gets back to the professional development and seeking out advisors and people similar to yourself that have been through it and have built businesses. It's being able to understand that, okay, if I seek out these individuals, maybe not everyone's going to be open to helping, right? But there's going to be a segment of the people that I reach out to that will be. And that's going to allow you, it's not just about working hard. It's also about having the right strategies.
True.
Right. And I think that's what really resonates to me about what you've been saying and some of the advice you've been given today.
It's good stuff, man. I've enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, this is fun. And I know we're coming up on time here. So, I just want to say like, it's been an absolute blast, and, thank you so much for coming on the show. And if you're open to it, we'd love to have you back on whenever you want to. If you got a new book coming out or whatever it might be, just definitely let us know. And we'd love to have you back on.
Awesome, James. Honestly, thank you so much for the invitation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it and would love to be back on.
Good stuff. And so, by the way, if people want to find you, could you tell us where they can find you online, and maybe you could tell us the titles of your books, just so I want to make sure that people are able to engage with you and find you.
Yeah, perfect. So the easiest is my personal website. It's jeffarnold.com, JEFFARNOLD.com. All kinds of publications there for free, and 5 of my books are there. But if you subscribe, we don't spam you. If you subscribe to my newsletter, we just put thought stuff out once a month. And then we have a publication called the Arizona 100. That's really just good facts about leadership and stuff around Arizona. You can apply it to any state you're in. But the best place, love to connect with you on LinkedIn, but you can get started with me at jeffarnold.com.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. And for everybody tuning in, thank you so much. And we'll see you next time. Take care.